Happy Saturday, everybody. Deb Filman here, mom, homeschooler, educator turned YouTuber, apparently. I wanted to chime in with a little bit of a spontaneous rant, I guess you might call it. I'm going to try not to be too ranty, but I'm inspired. On my way to a doctor's appointment, where I had to go today, nothing's wrong with me, it was just a regular checkup, I was listening to Viva Fry fact check the fact checkers from the debate the other night. If you don't know Viva Fry, I highly recommend his vlog, and you will find the particular video I'm talking about in one of my playlists called, I think it's something like Exposing Bias and Hypocrisy, something along those lines. I'm making a new playlist of people who are doing a fantastic job of that, and he made the cut as the inaugural video for the playlist. The reason it's so good is it goes after the wordsmithing of the so-called fact checkers. This has been something I've wanted to talk about for a long time. The way we use words matters. And as an educator, I can tell you, we have been dumbing down the teaching of language arts in our schools for years. And it's difficult for me to believe, in fact, I don't believe it, that it's not intentional. Because you could not possibly configure a better way to manipulate and control people than to control words, to control the language they learn, the language they use and understand. I have seen with my own eyes how teachers are not teaching grammar and composition. They claim it's another way to fight racism. I really, if I may interject here in my own video, I really hate the way the Black community is being used as a foil for all the changes people in power want to make to keep all of us under their boot heel, not just members of the Black community. So not only are these efforts not going to help members of the Black community at all, because I actually do accept the premise that they are starting, not all, obviously, but on average, starting below in terms of their, history of education in their community, what percentage of people went to college. They've been catching up. But let's not kid ourselves. We're not at parity. We're not at anything resembling equity organically. And the claim that all of these changes will help that, will get them there is not, it's a lie. Because what they're just doing is they're lowering the bar so they'll already be there. They're not actually helping individuals within this community have the skills, have the tools, have the knowledge, that ethereal product that you cannot give someone. They have to be offered and they have to take it, okay, and incorporate it into their being. You cannot do that. You can't get someone somewhere by coming to them when we're talking about knowledge. So I digressed for a moment. But using that as the argument, we're combating racism. It's racist to teach grammar. Grammar, if anyone remembers the Smithsonian write-up about whiteness, was included under the characteristics of whiteness. Use of proper grammar, use of proper English. But the inability to use it, the inability to make yourself understood clearly, the flip side of that is the inability to understand clearly. So if the only people who have the ability to do that, to communicate and understand using words and twisting words and understanding the subtle meanings of words, and who also have access to the means to change the meanings of words, if that's what happens, you have the perfect situation for controlling people. And Viva Fry's little vlog explained that. He went through painstakingly identifying in the NPR fact check article how they used unsupported premises, assumptions that were never challenged, and even just the use, he talked about a sentence where They pose a question, a rhetorical question that Trump supporters or Trump sympathizers might ask, and then come back and say no as the first word, as if to shame you into even out of asking the question. So there's all these little subtle tricks. You really must watch the video. I'm not gonna do it justice here, but it inspired me to talk about the importance of words, the importance of language, the importance of teaching language arts. We must do this, and we must do it across the board to every individual student. If we have students who are struggling, we need to help them. We need to expose them to literature. And this is another place the critical race theorists come in and say, that's all white dominated. It's white Western dominated. First of all, that's not accurate. There's plenty of literature that we could read that would help us, if only in that it's rhetorically different, it's stylistically different, and it would help students learn to compare and contrast the impact of language and how speaking in certain ways, storytelling, narrative construction versus expository writing and analysis. How are they different? We used to do this. We used to do this in school. We used to teach kids this. We aren't doing it anymore, except at the highest levels and usually by choice. In other words, if a student makes it to college and decides to become an English major and is fortunate enough to have an excellent professor or two, and they spend a lot of time on this, or they take a class in critical thinking of their own accord and they get into rhetoric, or they're homeschooled and they are doing classical conversations and they have an entire year that is focused on nothing but rhetoric, which of course they work up to because you have to work up to it, develop the foundational skills first, vocabulary, grammar. In order to craft rhetoric, you have to understand its purpose. In order to understand its purpose, you have to be able to read different usages, different examples, and talk about why. Why do you think, what's the message? What's this writer trying to get across? In the Common Core, for those of you who haven't really looked at it, or those of you who've looked at it and not really known what you're looking at, thinking, okay, well, it's an article and the student has to read it and has to answer a bunch of questions. The vast majority of the readings are what we call informational texts. They have the patina of fact because they're informational. They are not fiction in the strictest sense of the word. But when you read some of these texts, you clearly see narratives emerge. You clearly see an agenda. There are many of them on the environment, for example. Environment, pollution, certain aspects of science, and there's no effort in these classes to look at the informational texts and question. It's assumed, it's a foregone conclusion, informational text equals fact. And this is one of the ways they are teaching our students to regard everything that purports to be information, like the news, equals factual. So all they have to do is get their information to dominate your consciousness. When you turn on the news, when you read a paper, when you scroll through the internet, whatever, all they have to do is dominate occupying space. And that will translate to this generation, the Common Core generation, most of whom now are hitting their 20s, by the way. That's information. That's facts. I saw it on CNN. It's true. I read it in the New York Times. It's true. They have not been taught to dissect this. CNN is in every classroom. It's in every classroom, including the virtual classroom. There's no effort on the part of the teachers to question what it presents. Let's watch the news. We all know that CNN uses words no differently from any other biased source of information, and go ahead and say Fox News too. It doesn't matter. I don't care. And you know what? It wouldn't matter if they were all as biased as all get out, if we were equipping human beings in this country to listen with a critical ear, read with a critical eye, and understand language so they could recognize when someone is trying to manipulate them and make it more difficult for them to do that. But you see, we aren't doing that. And we aren't doing that because we don't truly, I say we, I mean the established people in power who set the agenda for education in this country, who are the teachers' unions, the Department of Education, bureaucratic cronies, teachers, administrators of local school districts, school boards, members of the PTO who just love to fit in and want to be team players. You know who you are. They're the same Karens who are running around our country going, put on your mask. These people dominate the PTO. The people who love the group, who want to be part of the group, who think the collective is awesome, who read things like It Takes a Village and they completely missed the point that it takes a village in the old-fashioned sense to hold students accountable, that it can't be just on their parents or just on their teachers. It used to be a time you could walk down the street and if you were behaving badly, one of your neighbors could correct you. But that's not what Hillary Clinton meant. She wanted to say it takes a village. In other words, you parents you're not really experts and you need experts. But we put a title like It Takes a Village and sort of like Black Lives Matter, we play little verbal tricks, which you would understand if you'd been taught language arts the way it should be taught, because it is an art form and some people are better at it than others. And right now the elite are fantastic at it. And the rest of our kids out there are not. And even educated people, I have a master's degree, have to work at it now. I have to overcome everything the schools have tried to do to my children. I have to go back and do remedial rhetoric training because they spent some time in public schools. And it is taking a lot of my effort. And I recognize the problem and I know how to remedy it. How many people out there do? How many English as a second language folks do we have in this country who can be manipulated and taken advantage of? And why am I so fixated on this? Why is this such a big deal to me? Well, I'm also a student of history. And what do I know about history? When was there a time? Let's think back, shall we? Let's go back a few thousand years. When was there a time when people, on balance, didn't know how to read and write, except maybe at the very rudimentary level? And only the elite could read and write and set the tone. When was that? Oh yes, I believe we called it the Dark Ages. Medieval times, when only the church could read. There were only people who went into the clergy were literate. They produced all the information. Well, it's not the church now. Maybe it's the church of woke when we're talking culture. But in terms of government, it's journalism. Journalism and government have become replacements for the church in medieval times. And by not teaching our kids language arts properly, they are taking over our minds because we don't have the ability to contradict them. And even when we try, so then it becomes the minority of people, the minority of students in a classroom, the minority of professors on a campus, the minority of journalists in the journalistic establishment, the minority of representatives in Congress, and so forth. We just keep making that minority smaller and smaller and smaller to the point where it's much easier to just drown them out. People like me, people like Viva Fry, people like Carlin, people like the other YouTubers I follow are still in the minority. And it's why it's so important for us to speak out, because we have to be louder. We have to work harder. Not to get our version of truth out. That's not what I'm talking about. But to get the process of getting to truth out. To remind people there is a process for that. There is something called critical thinking that we each need to do as individuals and that we must pass on to our children. That's one of the core purposes of education in a free society. If you cannot think critically, it is so much easier for someone to take away your freedom and dominate you. You literally can't contradict them. You have no argument. Masks work. How do we know? Because I was told. Experts told me. But how do you know? Dr. Fauci told me. That's not what I asked you. How do you know? See, the answer should be, I've read several studies. I checked the background of the research team. I checked whether it was peer reviewed. I checked the research methodology to make sure there was a control group and that it was a large enough sample size and that they don't have an agenda. They're not specifically connected to a drug company, a medical company, or a hospital, or a political party. They haven't recently taken giant infusions of cash from somebody who might have an interest in keeping us locked down or keeping us scared or keeping us dependent on government handouts because we can't go to work because we're scared. All of this comes out of critical thinking. Knowing is different than having been told. Knowing is different from, I believe this group of tellers versus that group of tellers. There's more of them than there are of you. They must be right. That's what we're teaching our kids. Informational text, informational text, informational text, all of which have been written by government, by the way, all of them. They're not being pulled out of private sources and just said, hey, let's read something from, the Wall Street Journal, or let's read something from, this private person who wrote an essay. Oh no, that I might think is actually kind of interesting. Again, especially if we taught them how to dissect it. But we don't. They're all produced by the writers who are approved by the Common Core, which is the government, which is the Department of Education, who are bureaucrats, unelected bureaucrats. Unelected. You didn't pick them. You picked Barack Obama, who worked with the Department of Education, Arnie Duncan, etc., to create the Common Core, which was widely criticized at the time for this precise reason. Also, the teaching of math has been destroyed, so the kids are innumerate. They come out of school, and the piece I did yesterday, or the day before yesterday, on the San Diego School District, 20% of the Black students are getting a D or F. 80% are not. 80% might be getting A's, we don't know. But see, that comes out of numeracy. When you understand math and how it applies to real life and how it works, then they can't fool you with statistics. Right? Mark Twain. There's lies, damn lies, and statistics. These kids don't even know that. They see a number. And I say kids, I'm talking 20-year-olds, 25-year-olds, even 30-year-olds were educated using this type of methodology. This goes way back. They've been sort of amping up. And how did they get the Common Core through? Because they'd already dumbed down the teaching of teachers. That had already been done. Just like they dumbed down the teaching of journalists. Just like they've taken everything and reduced it, always justifying it by saying, it's too hard, it's racist. It's too difficult, that makes it racist. The outcomes are not the same, that means it's racist. So they tug at our heartstrings. Because why? Because we're not racist. Because as a country, we are not. We are the most self-reflective, self-aware country on the planet. The most self-critical on the planet. I defy you to prove me wrong. Go ahead, try. We fought a bloody war with ourselves to improve ourselves. And so when people in supposed positions of expertise, especially with the teaching of children, it's for the children, tell us that it's racist, that these outcomes are because the curriculum is racist, it does something emotionally to people. I don't want to be racist. I'm not racist. I care about people. I want everyone to succeed. And if the experts tell me this is how to help everyone succeed, I'm on board. Even people who knew how to dissect language are busy, they're doing things, and experts said, so, okay, I don't want to be racist, let's do it. All you needed then was a minority of people who had an agenda. The rest were just well-intentioned. They actually cared. So the agenda-driven people went to the well-intentioned people to, this is what we need to do. Okay. And we need more money. Okay. And we need to teach teachers to teach it. Okay. Now it's this and this. Now it's, this is the way it is, and the dogma of, and the small minority going, but they don't know words anymore, and grammar's gone out the window, and I'm reading letters from the teacher that are illiterate from the teacher. Thanksgiving is fastly approaching, says my daughter's English teacher 2 years ago. It's fastly approaching. Fastly. Yeah. Okay. I mean, there and you and your and less and more and, or fewer rather. That's gone out the window. I mean, that's, all those little internet memes where it's like, oh, grammar, use some. There's a reason, guys. We can joke around and make memes all day long, but this happened for a reason. There's a reason. I call my presence on the internet the reason we learn. Because there were reasons. There's a purpose to it. There's a purpose to learn and a purpose to teach. And unfortunately right now, the purpose of teaching has shifted from developing individual humans and citizens who can participate in our republic. I'm not going to call it a democracy. We have a democratic form of government, but we are a republic, a representative republic, a constitutional republic. And in order to participate in it, you need to be literate. You need to be numerate. You need to be independently possessed of these things. You need to be able to vote intelligently, not just, okay, so, it's like Saddam Hussein told me to vote for Saddam Hussein. And that, people say, well, in Iraq, they had 90% literacy. They did. They had higher literacy than we do in the United States, but they all went to the polls and went, Saddam, what does it matter if you can decode? If the information you're reading is garbage, what does it matter? You see, and I'm trying to put together a course in critical thinking, and I discussed this with my husband last night. I said, I just thought of something. What if I do all this and it ceases to matter because the facts, the statements that are being made are not true, and so and yet all the evidence isn't true either. So how am I going to teach my students to identify bad arguments if the arguments are structurally appropriate, like they're built appropriately, statement, premise, conclusion, and all of those are based in what we might call fact, like those informational texts, but the facts are lies. That's what I'm seeing now. I look at the news and I'm like, Donald Trump did this and he's a racist. And then you say, okay, give me an example. Well, he said this on such and such a date, except he didn't. So they have a date and they have a quote and all these things. And you have to actually go look and find he actually never said that. Or he said those 3 words, but you've pulled it so far out of context that what you're calling a fact is he said this. Yes, that's factually accurate, but that's not what was meant. And the only way we know what was meant is if we look at the whole thing. So yes, you're looking at arguments constructed using the appropriate template, but the facts are not facts. Just like the informational text, half of them are garbage. I've read them. I'm like, this is not true. What are they? This is an opinion. What they're calling a fact came out of a biased study put together by politically motivated people who got donations or who give donations to specific politicians because it advances their career, their goals, their ideology, etc. We're not teaching our children how to do any of this. And it starts in kindergarten. It starts with the teaching of language. It starts with the teaching that words matter. They're not interchangeable little chunks of stuff. They have meaning. And as I said at the beginning, this was going to be a little ranty. It is ranty. I'm sorry. I watched this thing and I said, this is so frustrating as a teacher. The reason we learn is to be able to do these things. I still believe that we need to function as individuals. Even if you want to be a cog in the machine, there's going to come a day where they come to you and say, as they did in all the East Bloc countries, remember that free healthcare. I'm sorry, you're over X age and we've decided you're not worth saving. We have to ration it. That's not free. You need to be able to recognize that and figure out what you're going to do. What am I going to do? So in the end, live, die, etc. You're going to do that alone. You're going to have to cope with this life alone. Even if you set up your perfect little collectivist utopia, and that is the reason we learn. Ideally, so we don't ever have to live in that, but if God forbid we do, we have coping skills. We can function. We're not all drinking ourselves to death, as many of the Soviets did, or killing ourselves literally, as many Soviet scientists after Chernobyl just did, because they're like, I can't. Reason has gone out the window. And then that's the play on words of the reason we learn. Reason is something we learn. You have to be taught. You don't just wake up knowing how to think critically. You just don't. It doesn't happen automatically when you turn 21. It doesn't happen just because you have a college education. It doesn't. It depends what you were taught. It depends. If you ever run across somebody who says that's not thinking, That's accepting someone else's thinking with uncritically. The Atlantic said so. Bob Woodward said so. Therefore, it's true. Unnamed sources, but it's the Atlantic. But they said such and such happened. I'm like, where's the proof? Russian collusion, Russian collusion, Russian collusion, Russian collusion. Adam Schiff in front of a camera, every other day. I can't tell you, but it's there. No one else, they all testified under oath. It wasn't there. Without saying they're liars, never said they're liars. You would have had to be held accountable for that, right? There's evidence, but there is. But no, literally no one involved has said there is. They all said there isn't, but there is. All you have to do is be him and get in front of the camera and dominate the space and use the words, and it's true. Joseph Goebbels said that. Tell a lie often enough, loudly enough, make it big, make it huge, and people will believe it. And that's where we are because of language and the lack of teaching of language. So Viva Frei comes at it from one point of view, from the legal standpoint and a rhetorical standpoint, as adults. I'm coming at it as a parent, as an educator. And I'm appealing to other parents and other educators. If you genuinely care about children and you want them to have successful, happy lives as something other than serfs, tax slaves, unconscious, unwitting pawns in somebody else's power trip, you must teach them language. And I don't just mean speaking it or reading books. I mean understanding how words get used to manipulate. You must do this. It is absolutely essential. I think I'm done. Thank you for watching this far. Thank you for coming to my channel. I hope you will subscribe and like and comment. If any of this resonates, please share your ideas with me. And I'm going to go off and try to forget about all of this and have a great Saturday. And I hope you do the same. Have a good one.